Good morning, fellow ruminators. Welcome back to another session, Rumination with Andrew. Thank you so much for joining as we are about to discuss a very important topical matter. Now, this morning, I will be talking briefly about the militarization of U.S. college campuses. And anything that happens in the United States, you can guarantee that it is happening in other parts of the world. But today, we are going to examine more specifically US college campuses. And that has been going on for years, right? Years, and something that we need to understand. Now, before I open up, let me have you listen to a video. It's a brief TikTok video on two young miss who were talking about, you know, I think they participated in the encampment at Columbia University, and they're just giving their experiences to this journalist. Let's share my screen with you so that you can view this brief TikTok clip, all right? So let's get there and begin this video. All right, now what am I able to turn it on? Wow. Okay, I have to turn it on first. Okay, let me see what is happening here. Sometimes you have these technical difficulties. Let me make this a big page and then I can share and see what happens at this moment. All right, so let me put it on here.
We both just got emails from Barnard saying that we are interim suspended.
And for what? What's the charge?
I mean, yesterday they came in, a few Barnard administrators came in and warned everybody, saying that if we didn't disperse, they would, what was it?
That we would be interim
deactivate our IDs by 9 p.m., which didn't happen. I was able to use my ID this morning, but I guess it kicked in just now.
Yeah, I guess they decided to go through with it, but
I thought they were bluffing actually, because this morning when my ID worked, I was like, okay.
But you guys are still staying.
oh no, we're gonna
Yeah,
stay.
we're staying. Oh, they can expel me and I'll stay.
They can suspend every single one of us and we'll still be here.
So they can put us in jail. We'll come back to 10 again. Like,
Yeah.
we're not leaving.
I heard this is also like the designated protest. Like this is where people go to protest on campus.
Yeah, but we didn't book the designated demonstration zone, so
So that warrants suspension.
yes. Yeah. Bureaucracy, wow.
Well, I'm not sure what your impression of that video is, but it's interesting to see that these young people who were sent to university are participating in this sort of protest. And they have stated that they are willing to go to prison, to go to jail, regardless of what happens. Now, that is something interesting, and we hope that our young people are being educated and not being indoctrinated into accepting one political partisan view, because that is what is happening across the US and across the world at large, where people are just tethered to this sort of political ideology, which is a secular religion. It is not really politics, really, because when you look at what people do and the things that they would die for. Now, things that they should die for are things that they're not trying to die for, right? They're trying to die for a political ideology. And kudos to them. But we want to see a group of young people who are educated and who are able to stand up for what is right, what is morally right. Of course, the killing of the people in Gaza is something that they ought to stand up for. The problem in America right now, we do not know who controls this protest. You've always got to ask who's behind it and who's funding this protest, because somebody's behind it. Make no bones about it. And then we see now that I just opened political newspaper, and they're saying this is a title of an opinion piece that college protests keep spreading after Columbia crackdown. So we see we should address this when it is just a spark. New York City Mayor Eric Adams said Tuesday, let's not wait until it's a blazing fire. So we see now that something is behind it. Somebody has had to organize this sort or these sort of protest actions because they're now spreading, as Eric Adams is suggesting, across other college campuses. So there's chaos reigning at our college campuses, and there are reports of injury, minor injuries, though they be, and also students being threatened and professors also. So that is something that we need to be aware of and we need to be mindful of. Now, we have here when we look at what is happening across the United States, and this has been happening for some time now, where we're seeing the militarization of our college campuses. These protest actions, as I've just suggested, we are not sure who might be behind them, who are behind the funding and the organizing of these protest actions. Do you know that the same enemy that you think could be behind it? The same US military industrial complex, the same military could be, and intelligence services could be behind it, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who create the confusion and then they tell you that they have the solution. And then your entire campus is militarized, the very agenda that they are seeking or that they were seeking in the first place, and something that you have to be aware of, right? And US college campuses have been militarized for some times now. This is nothing new, but I think that they are moving towards militarizing or full militarization of all major campuses, because that's how they can be able to track and to trace different ideologies and what people are thinking. Because in order to become a state that is authoritarian, you've got to really look at your intellectual community, because they are the thinking ones, right? And you want to clamp down on any thinking or thought processes that might be opposite or that might be contrarian to what the military industrial complex wants you to do. Now, just a little quotation here from Chalmers in his The Sorrows of Empire. And he has here surrogate soldiers and private mercenaries. And this is on page 132. He says, particularly since the end of the Cold War, the military has developed close relations with myriad governments and officer corps in the Third World and has put immense effort into military-to-military training programs. It says military-to-military training programs. It's no longer using the State Department to negotiate. During the 1990s, leaders in both political parties concluded that many foreign policy goals could best be fostered through such military-to-military contacts and weapons sales as opposed to traditional economic and diplomatic ties. So the United States is now, well, moved then from the 1990s from diplomatic and economic negotiations, right, to military operations. One program for implementing such policies, the State Department's International Military Education and Training Program, that is the IMET, has increased fourfold since 1994, right? So this is something that we have to understand. He says here, the United States claims that it trains foreign armies as a way of teaching them American values and models of civil-military relations. Pentagon officials regularly assure congressional committees that educating foreign soldiers helps correct the civil rights records of sometimes abusive militaries. Now, there's something that I saw here, but I think that I've lost the page number, so I might not be able to get to that one. All right, so maybe another time we'll do that. But let's look at something here that I have pulled up and from Vice. This is in an online newspaper. Let us look at it, and the title of the article here is "The Most Militarized Universities in America, a Vice News Investigation." And this was done from 2015. All right, so a lot of what we're seeing now, you are behind, because when we should have been following these things, we were not. We were more attached to our mainstream media and what they were reporting and what they were not reporting. And because of that, we find ourselves in the dark ages. We're living in a dark period where people are not educated. They're not informed, because that is what the media should have been doing. And I would say probably for the past 30 or more years, the mainstream media in the United States have not been educating and informing the citizenry of the United States. So you find that many, including so-called educated people, are living in darkness, right? Their minds are dark. They think they're educated because they've gone to universities and they're in good, decent jobs, but that is not education, right? That is just qualifying, schooling you to be able to do a job, to fulfill the tasks and the roles of, whatever responsibilities you have on that job. Now, we have here the most militarized universities, and it says billions of federal dollars and explosive growth in the intelligence community since 9/11 are having drastic effects on US schools. What does that mean for higher education and for America's national security? That's the question being asked, being raised. And the column, and this article was written by William M. Arkin and Alexa O'Brien. And it was written, as I told you, from November 6, 2015. So that's some years ago. Is it 9 years ago? Right, perhaps that time, right? Because we're now in 2024. An information and intelligence shift has emerged in America's national security state over the last 2 decades, and that change has been reflected in the country's educational institutions as they have become increasingly tied to the military, intelligence, and law enforcement wars. This is what we have become. So the United States institutions, that's the college universities, are now militarized, at least most of them. This is why Vice News has analyzed and ranked the 100 most militarized universities in America, right? Initially, we hesitated to use the term militarized to describe these schools. The term was not meant to simply evoke robust campus police forces or ROTC drills held on campus quad. It was also a measure of university labs funded by US intelligence agencies, administrators with strong ties to those same agencies, and most importantly, the educational backgrounds of the approximately 1.4 million people who hold top secret clearance in the United States. So they are saying here that administrators with strong ties to these same agencies. So sometimes some of these presidents that we have and administrators at the universities, they do have strong ties to the military-industrial complex, right? And to the national security state, something that you need to be aware of. And it's interesting to see that even at modest universities where they're not very wealthy, such like Howard University and other universities, of that ilk, their administrators, their presidents, they reap so much money, per month, per annum, I mean, and all the benefits that are accrued to them. While sometimes you find that your faculty members are not properly compensated, right? And people think that that is what it should be. They think that, the president is so important that he should be earning all that money, not understanding a lot of times that a lot of the administrators are, some of whom are tied to this military industrial complex, which is a very wealthy complex. And that is why they're able to pay lots of money to these people. But ultimately, we came to believe that no term sums up all of those elements better than militarized. Today's national security state includes a growing cadre of technicians and security professionals who sit at computers and manage vast amounts of data. They far outnumber conventional soldiers and spies. And as the skills demanded from these digital warriors have evolved, higher education has evolved with them. Right? Very important we understand that. And parents who have their children, young children who are going to universities, better be aware of this, right? That the university campuses are militarized and they know everything about you, right? About the children and about you, the parents, where you live, where you work, and everything that you do. The 100 schools named in the Vice news rankings produce the greatest number of students who are employed by the intelligence community, that's the IC, have the closest relationships with the national security state, and profit the most from American war waging, right? So yeah, even the universities profit from American war waging. Blood universities, right? Universities that have blood on their hands. Because if you are participating in these endeavors, right, it means therefore that you are guilty of spilt and shed blood, right? And that is what we have to understand. And no wonder the chaos on our university campuses, because when that happens, wherever the military goes, wherever the US military goes, chaos reigns, right? Chaos reigns because chaos is their major staple. That's what people need to understand. That without chaos, the military cannot survive, right? Just like deception, the devil, if there was nothing called deception, the devil would not, defeat any of you or any of us, right? Because that is the devil's main tool, right? The tool of deception. That's the only thing he can use to win the battle against God, right? And against good, right? That is the only thing that the devil uses. As far as the US is concerned, chaos is what it uses for deceiving the masses of people around the world, including in the United States, because there is no more people on the face of the earth as propagandized as US citizens are. They are not aware of what the US is doing in other parts of the world. They have a very, very limited understanding, a very limited grasp of what is happening around the world. National security-related degree programs cater not just to new technologies and education needs, but also to the careers of a regimented workforce offering distance learning, flexible credits, and easy transfers to accommodate frequent deployments, assignment changes, and shift work. Now listen to what it's saying here. 4 categories of institutions of higher education dominate the Vice News list of the 100 most militarized universities in America, schools whose students attain their degrees predominantly online, schools that are heavily involved in research and the development for defense, intelligence, and security clients, schools in the Washington, D.C. area, and schools that are newly focused on homeland security. Something that is very interesting to note with what is happening at Columbia and other universities around America, the ones who are participating in these protest actions, is the fact that any disorder that we have, the government has or the institutions that support the government, they seem to have now the authority vested in them to lock us down. So you find now that the students at Columbia and perhaps other universities are now contemplating, or some of them have already made the decision that the students will now, go, they will study online, right? Instead of having classes in the classroom, they will now, do online classes. Now, we know that came about in 2020. And it seems like that now is going to be the solution forward, right? So any disorder, any unrest, any sort of disorder that we might have in our community, the government and institutions around can lock us down, right? Because that's the new sort of game that is in the bag. Now, 20 of the top 100 schools that instruct people working in intelligence agencies, the military, and the worlds of law enforcement and homeland security, including their private contractor counterparts, are effectively online diploma mills. 12 are for-profit companies. Several didn't exist before 9/11. The schools have become so important that 2 of them, American Military University #2 and the University of Phoenix #3, rank near the top of the list, based on the sheer number of their graduates working in the top secret world. And one of the things we need to understand is that the people who run the government are coming from these schools, right? Coming from the Harvards and coming from the Yales and the Princetons and the Phoenixes and all of these schools, right? These are the ones, these are the schools from which they have emerged. And sometimes we forget. And they must have been indoctrinated, because what we see is a continuation or a continuity of government, what we call COG, right? And it doesn't mean, therefore, that these people just came out and, oh, and they are thinking that way. They had to have been indoctrinated from they were attending university, right? So the universities have become centers of indoctrination. And that's what we mean by militarization, because when you're in the military, you have to be indoctrinated, right? You've got to really accept the philosophy and the modes of, operation of the military, or you will be kicked out, you'll be evicted, right? Because that is the purpose of the military, to obey orders and not to think for yourself. Now, 17 of the 100 top schools are in the Washington, D.C. area, reflecting the concentration of all things national security around the nation's capital. And we know that D.C., particularly after the January 6, 2001 Capitol debacle, we know that that city is heavily militarized, that the Washington, D.C. area is heavily militarized, right? And some people have been telling me about the increase of crime and violence in the DC metropolitan area. And anywhere, again, any city that is highly militarized is going to have lots of violence and crime and lots of vices, drug abuse, and you name it, right? Chaos reigns supreme wherever you have the US military, right? Because in many cases also, they are allowed, they are extricated, they are exonerated from any charges that you can make against them, even perhaps on US soil. The University of Maryland handily outranks all other schools at number 1. Right? And the University of Maryland College Park is a university that I'm very, very acquainted with and used to be there almost every day. Well, every Sunday, I should say, but sometimes I would go there during the week because, they have a wonderful library and the campus is just a beautiful, picturesque campus, right? And, when I was there, in the early 2000s, you could see that University of Maryland was beginning to, it was gaining back traction and was fast ascending to be one of the top universities in the US. But, as the years went by, I could see that there were lots of buildings being put up and so on. And sometimes you really wonder, where is that money coming from? Now, while Georgetown, number 10, very acquainted with Georgetown, also used to go there. George Washington University, number 4, very, very also acquainted with that university, and American University, number 20. All the time I spent in the Washington, D.C. area, I don't think I've ever been to American University. I know where it is, but I have never been on the campus. All considered among the country's 10 best schools for the study of international relations. And that is why they are known for international relations, because they are there to indoctrinate you about US military undertakings around the world and its quest for full spectrum dominance. Rank among the top 25 most militarized schools. So you have Georgetown, you have the University of Maryland, you have George Washington University and American universities. They are predominantly militarized universities, right? But post 9/11 growth in homeland security and a high demand for cyber training boost schools as diverse as George Mason, number 5. So George Mason is high on the list. And I had a friend who went there and told me of how that university is so modern and is highly equipped with these high-tech, you know, technological gadgets. And you wonder that she says, Andrew, it would outrank Howard University, right? And we once thought that that university was below Howard University, right? But that is not so in terms of its, its growth, right? Its rapid growth, as it is one of the bona fide militarized institutions in America. Northern Virginia Community College, who would even think that the community colleges are also a part of that? Yes, but it ranks number 16, and Strayer University number 8. Who would have thought of Strayer? A predominantly online school headquartered in Herndon, Virginia. Right? So that is what is happening, that the United States really is a militarized country. But hear this about these other institutions. 17 powerhouse research universities, traditionally supporting the oft-cited military-industrial complex, rank in the top 100, including Johns Hopkins, number 7. And I've heard some stories about Johns Hopkins University, right? Particularly in the period of the 60s and the 70s. A rather interesting university. Penn State, number 15, Georgia Tech, number 26, and the Massachusetts Institute of Technology, which I thought would have been ranked higher, number 47. 10 of these schools amount for $2.05 billion in national security research and development funding, which is 2/3 of the approximately $3 billion Vice News calculates the federal government gave to the top 100 schools last year. And by the way, this was written in 2015 under the presidency of Barack Hussein Obama, right? So that's for you to know, to understand that there is no difference between the Democrats and the Republicans. And, I was listening to a podcast done by, in which Gerald Horne, the historian, African-American historian in the United States, a great historian, and I've read at least 2 of his books, which have been fascinating, and he really does a good job of laying out the history. But he's so much aligned with this democratic thought process that sometimes he gets his information wrong. Well, the interpretation of the information wrong, because he's knowledgeable. Give Gerald Horne his credit. He's a brilliant man. But a lot of times, because he's so much, linked with this, left-wing understanding of the world, he gets it wrong. So yesterday he was, on the podcast I was watching yesterday, he was talking about the fact that, the rise of Trump and white supremacy. So the rise of Trump linked to fascism and white supremacy. And I'm like, come on, Gerald Horne, you know better than that. You know that America's always been a white supremacist state, all right? And always been a fascist state, because that is what happens about fascism, when you have your private institutions linked with the government. And now we have everything in the United States, even the church. And one day we will look at also religious institutions also linked or connected to the military-industrial complex, right? And that is why many of our institutions during 2020, and I won't call the name and what happened, had to follow government diktats. Okay, I ended there. Yet, rather than traditional weapon systems, what these schools mostly research, often in classified laboratories, is intelligence technologies, cybersecurity, and big data analytics, challenging the common view of what militarization means. So even their research has to be in the interest of the military-industrial complex and not information that is used to empower the population, right? The citizenry of the United States and by extension, the world. I hope you're thinking, because sometimes I do not know if lots of us are able to make connections, and I can't make all the connections for you. You've got to also to delve and to dive into some of this research for yourselves, right? So you can educate yourselves and you can educate your families. Those of you who are young parents, right? When I say young parents, I mean you have young children in school and who have not yet been going to these universities, you've got to really rethink your positions. You've got to really rethink your positions. And if they're not getting scholarships, you know, what's the sense sending them to institutions that they're going to be indoctrinated into, you know, following the diktats of the military industrial complex? Something that you've got to think about, because this is not going to end well, right? What is happening here, what we're reading here is not going to end well. And it's not like it changed after Trump came into office 2016 or Biden came into office in 2021. Right? This is a continuity of government. And this is why people like Chalmers Johnson wrote the book, The Sorrows of Empire. More than 2,050 schools now offer certificates and degrees in Homeland Security. What is that? Right? You have all of these degrees that they've given you in all of these degrees that you have. Maybe you have a degree now in LGBT and I don't know, right? There are so many different certificates and degrees now that you really, really wonder. And by the way, these are the people who are going to get jobs because they have the certificates and degrees in what the military industrial complex want them to have those degrees in, right? So if they have degrees in Homeland Security, I can bet you that they will have a job at the State Department, somewhere thereabout, but their jobs will be secured and they will walk around with a lot of self-importance. So we have a relatively new discipline combining emergency management, physical security, and information security. Meanwhile, intelligence courses are a growing prerequisite for criminology and law enforcement education, a transformation reaching beyond federal agencies into local police. With new programs and increasing government and private sector funding, the top Homeland Security schools include Texas A&M, number 14. I think that is a predominantly Black institution, I think. Louisiana State, number 96. Duke, number 66. The University of Minnesota, number 76. And Rutgers, number 73. Right? Something very, very interesting. Very, very interesting to see that these universities are a part of the U.S. military industrial complex. Because guess what? Professors, you know, they need to do research. You publish or you perish. What if the funds are not available from civilian corporations, right? Or from civilian corporate donors? Then the military comes with its attraction and having lots of money because the US military is wealthy. That system, that industry is affluent. It has a lot of money. And you know why? Because it's also tied up with the arms industry, right? And that's why you have crime and violence in countries like Jamaica and in the Caribbean and Latin America will not be solved because these weapons have to be sold. They have to be sold so that money can be generated. Lives have to be lost so that money can be generated, that money can be made, because it is what? Profit over people. It is profit over people. Now, the rankings rely on a unique data set of more than 90,000 individuals who have worked in and around the IC since 9/11. The sample represents approximately 6% of all the people in the US with a top secret clearance and includes military and law enforcement personnel, government civilian employees, and contractors at the federal, state, and local levels. Need we say more, right? Need we say more, or need I say more, as a matter of fact, right? So I'll leave this link and you can read the information for yourselves, right? You can read the information for yourself. But let's look at this. A half dozen schools in the top 100 had national security degree programs throughout the Cold War. George Washington University, number 4, Johns Hopkins, number 7, Georgetown, number 10, Harvard, number 32, MIT, number 47, the University of Denver, number 93, and Missouri State University, number 95. I was listening to a podcast with Eric Weinstein, and he's a US mathematician, and he has a PhD from Harvard University in the field in mathematics. And he was suggesting that Harvard University, there are 2 layers to Harvard, right? The layer of the powerful, right? The people who are powerful there, who set the trend for US and US power structure, right? And then you have those, that power of excellence. And he says that the power has to stand above the excellence. So the Harvard is narrative driven. It drives the narrative of what happens in the United States. It's not necessarily that it's the best university in the world as they claim that it is. And people tend to think that, wow, you go to Harvard, it means therefore that you have the best education in the world. That does not mean so. It means therefore that it controls the power, it controls the narrative, and because many people are not able to think for themselves, they believe what they see and what they hear, right? And not necessarily what the truth is. Eric Weinstein went on to say, which I was really flabbergasted when he made that statement, that in the 1990s, when he was defending his PhD dissertation, right, his thesis, that Harvard University did not allow him to be in the defense room. Now, how can you defend your PhD and not be allowed to be in the defense? You weren't allowed to defend your own thesis, a thesis that you wrote. It's ridiculous. It means, therefore, that it's controlled. What if I do not agree with the changes, or I have something, I should be the major actor in that degree because I wrote that degree. I am passionate about what I wrote, and I would like to defend the findings, right? My analyses. But that is what he says. Eric Weinstein made that statement that he was not allowed to be in the defense room. He was locked out of his own defense, the thesis defense, right? I've never heard anything like that in my life. Now, we have here, Maryland is the most militarized university in America, says Vice News. And this is, I'm not sure what the date here is. I see 0999, I'm not sure. But I know that it was written in December 31st, on December 31st. I'm not sure if it's 1999, don't know. Now, in a new ranking, Vice News says that the University of Maryland is the most militarized university in the United States, but that doesn't exactly mean what you might think it means. Vice ranking is designed to reflect how closely tied universities are to the country's military establishment. As such, the top 10 is packed with schools from the Washington area. But if it is that they are connected to the military and they're tied to the military, then they are militarized and that they're going to be controlled. That the research coming out of the university is not going to reflect, the research of the population or the problems that are, besetting the population, right? It's going to be more the problems of the military, right? And I can guarantee you that the problems of the military and the problems facing the United States, which mean the civilian population, are distinct. They're not the same, and their genders are also distinct, right? The two cannot cohere in the same room. They cannot live. They cannot, cohabit. And that is what is happening there. So Maryland is number 1, followed by Georgetown, George Washington University number 4, George Mason number 5, Johns Hopkins number 7, and Georgetown number 10. Right? So this is what is happening at the universities. I just wanted to point out these facts to you to let you understand that what you see happening at Columbia and what seems to be spreading across other university campuses in the United States, right, are a reflection of what is the reality that is, which is the militarization of US universities, of US higher education. That is something that we have to be aware of. Now, it's very important that people begin to ask, who is behind or who are behind? What corporations, what corporate entities, what billionaires are behind the protest actions in the United States? It's a little bit amok and stands amiss that you see these young people who, if you ask them, many of them don't even know what they're protesting about or for. Yeah, many of them don't know. They're just following the flow. Sounds like some people in Palestine, which is true, are being murdered for nothing. Innocent lives are being taken. But if you should ask them about the role and the function of the military-industrial complex and how that industrial complex is linked to their university and the facilities that they enjoy at their university, the comfort that they have at these universities, they would be shocked. Right? Many of them would be shocked because they haven't got a clue. They haven't got a clue of what is happening, right? And many US citizens are alike. They do not understand that the comfort that they enjoy in that country is as a result of the deaths of many people, of spilled and shed blood, right? Of innocent lives. Make no bones about it. Most of that murder and the killings that take place around the world, right, is as a result, comes as a result of US military undertakings. Right? Right? We've got to get our acts together now. We've got to understand that the military-industrial complex is something that is not our friend, right? And it is pervading every nook and cranny of our lives, be it religious, economic, academic, every sphere of our lives, right, is now being influenced by this great and grandiose complex, right? So I hope that you will share this information with as many people as possible, and that you will also do more research on how the education or the academic world, the academy, is currently being militarized. I think it has already been militarized. I think long years ago, even when I was a part of the academy, it has been militarized. And there were things that I noted and I used to be a little bit quizzical of, right? And curious about. But as I am reading more now and I have grown older and more mature and also have gleaned more information and more knowledge, I am able to put everything together. What is happening in the United States is sad, and it is only going to get worse. It is only going to get worse. What are you going to do about it? Thank you so much for joining. I hope that you will like and you will share and you will subscribe to the channel. See you in the next video. Ciao.